Hey everybody, it's Cece here, and today's video is all about choosing the right size macrame cord for your projects. Stay tuned until the end because I will share with you my top tip on how to make sure you're using the right size macrame cord. Now, if you're just starting out in macrame, you've probably noticed by now that there are a lot of different size cords to choose from. They can range from a really thin 1mm cord all the way up to a really fat 10mm cord and even beyond. So you're probably wondering, how do I choose which macrame cord to use for my projects? Well, there are a few really simple theories that you can keep in mind that will help you with this decision. Now, the first theory that I have is how much surface area do you want to cover for your project? And what I mean by this is if you take a really small piece of string and you knot one square knot, you're going to end up with a really small knot. Whereas if you take a really thick piece of string and you create the same square knot, you're going to end up with something that covers a lot more surface area. Think about this in terms of a wall hanging. If you want to create a really large wall hanging but you use a really thin string, you're just going to have to create a lot more knots to cover that surface area. If you decided to use a really thick cord, on the other hand, you're not going to have to do as much work and it will come together a lot quicker. The next thing to consider is the style of your piece. So you might want to look at using a really thick cord if you want something really chunky and fun, maybe gives a wow factor as you walk into the room. It's really big and bold. But if you really want to have something that's more detailed and you can really pay attention to the knots that you're creating, then go for something a little bit thinner. Now, if you're doing a micro macrame project like jewelry, then you're going to definitely need something really thin, like a 1 to 2mm cord. Another concept which is really great to understand is that a thick cord, such as an 8 to 10mm cord like this one here, uses a lot more cord to create the same kind of knots as if you were using maybe a 3 to 5mm cord. The reason is because it's really fat, and so when you're creating a square knot, it's going to use more length than if you were using something like this. That's good to know because then it dictates how much length you're going to need for your projects. And if you don't have a lot of cord, or maybe you don't have a great budget, it's probably better not to go with something like a really thick cord that's going to cost you more and also you're going to need more of. The final thing to keep in mind is how much time do you have and how patient are you? Now, I like to think of macrame as a way to tune out, meditate, and actually practice patience. So I don't mind using smaller strings to create a really detailed piece that will take me more time. But if you're the kind of person that wants to get a piece done really quick and you don't want to spend a lot of time fussing with the small details, then you're probably better off going with a thicker cord, maybe a 5 or 6mm, so you get the job done quick and easy. So now let me quickly go through a few different size cords with you and what they're best for. Starting with the 1 to 2.5mm cord, and this is a really thin cord that's great for small projects or if you're practicing micro macrame. So think about things like making jewelry with this kind of cord. The next size up is a 3 to 4mm cord, and this is probably the one that I use the most of, and it's a really universal string that's good for most projects. In particular though, you probably want to use it for something like a small wall hanging or a pot plant hanger, or it's even really good to use to make macrame clothing as an option. The next size up is a 5 to 6mm cord, which is a little bit chunkier than your 3 to 4mm, but can be used for pretty much exactly the same projects. It is better to use if you're creating a really large wall hanging or maybe even a large project like a baby swing. And then the final cord that I have here is an 8 to 10mm chunky cord like this one. And this is a really great decorative cord which you can use to create fringes or tassels, or it's also great if you get it in a braided cord, and then you can use it to hang up really heavy items because it's quite strong and durable. Think about a child's swing, for example. So there are 4 different size cords and what I would use them for, but I think the best thing to do in any situation is to just try it out for yourself. So buy a few different sizes, make a few different projects, and see what you like best. Now, if you are going to order a bunch of different strings just to try before you decide on your go-to, then here is my tip to make sure that you know which cord that you're using every time you start a project. And that is, when you get your order, the first thing that you have to do is write the size of the cord inside the roll here. Now, when I first started macrame, I would order all of this string, and then when I went to make a project, I didn't know which size was what because I wasn't writing on the cord what size it was. So make sure you're writing on your cord every time what size it is, and you're not going to get confused. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and you've learnt a little something about how to choose the cords for your project. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you can find out more tips and tricks on how to macrame, and here's to finding our peace and creativity.